Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to you all, or good morning if it's still early where you're joining us from. My name is Martin Mwebia, and I'm part of the team that provides student support here at ACCA. You're just in time for the financial reporting exam in focus webinar, and this session is designed to support your preparation for the FR exam. And I'm very pleased to be joined by FR expert tutor Alina Karim. Now, the session today is going to be on stepping inside the mind of the marker. And before I hand over to Alina to run us through the session, I'd just like to share a few housekeeping items. Now, at the bottom of your screen, there are a number of icons or buttons that are going to be useful in this session. So please ensure that you can see all this. There's a help icon on the left, and that's going to provide resources and information to help you resolve any technical issues that you might experience. You'll see the icon for the slides and the media player. So this will enable you to see the content that we'll be sharing in this session. So ensure that you can see those two slides on your screen. There is an attendee chat function, which will enable you to engage with fellow webinar attendees. And that icon is on the right-hand side. And please do note that that's a publicly accessible forum. So please do not share any private information such as your phone number or your email address. There is a list of available resources. Anything that we refer to in this session should be available in that icon that looks like a file symbol. So you'll be able to access the resources that are relevant to this webinar, including any direct links. Now, your screen should allow you to resize or rearrange as you'd like. So please feel free to navigate it in that sense. And in case you have any challenges, you can't see the visuals or you can't hear the sound, please do refresh your browser. Now, if you've registered for this session, you will receive an email tomorrow with the link to access the recording. So don't worry if you miss out on any bit of the webinar, as you can always go back and watch the recording of this session. Now, I'm going to hand over to Alina in a moment. And if you'd like to ask us a question, please use the Q&A button, which should also be visible on your screen. And we will receive your questions. We have a team in the back end that will be actively responding to those questions as we proceed. So please do put in your questions bright and early. We'll pick a few questions live towards the end and respond to those. But do put in your questions early and we'll have them responded to as we proceed. So that's it with the housekeeping items. And now just handing over to you, Alina, for the session.
Thank you so much, Martin. It is a pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the students from all across the world. I was seeing in the chat, we have people from Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Brighton, very close to my heart, Jamaica. So all of these spaces, so we have a variety of audience and a very good pool of audience, which is here today. And we'll try to make the session as useful for you as possible, as insightful for you as possible. And if you have any questions, you can ask, because this is your chance to, I know this is the time where we are very close to the exam. So this is like where we sort of like re-strategize and see that if we have like almost 3 weeks left in the exam, now what we need to do to maximize our marks. And which is why I think the timing of these webinars is also so critical, because right now we are not covering the course. We're not just talking about how the question is going to be answered or what kind of questions are going to be answered. We are going to talk about the mind of the marker. So a little bit of introduction about me as we start. So in the today's webinar, we are going to, the name is Step Inside the Mind of the Marker. And that's a very interesting name, because when we are teaching, and when we are doing questions as a student, ultimately what we always think is, okay, what will the marker say about this? How many marks will the marker give for this? And after the exam also, when we are like in the fingers crossed and praying mood, we say, oh, we hope that the marker gives us the maximum marks. So the stepping inside the mind of that person who is going to mark your exam, that is very important. And that is precisely the aim of today's session also. So a quick roundabout at what we are going to look at. We are going to discuss some key insights about the FR Read the Mind of the Marker. It was recently released by the exam marker. So we are going to see what marks are being given, how they are allocated, then how marks are awarded, what are the common reasons for losing marks. Because at times you have prepared well, you have practiced well, but things are not presented in a way which will gain you maximum marks. So in the today's session, we are going to focus a lot on the marking. How can you get maximum marks? What do you write to get 1 mark? What do you write to get 0.5 marks? Because each mark is important. Then we are going to have a comprehensive review of the technical examples which have been given in the Read the Mind of the Marker. There were two questions which were given by the marker. One was related to consolidation, the other was related to ratios. So we're going to discuss both of them in detail, and then we are going to talk about some practical advice as to how, standing at this time, you can do maximum preparation for the upcoming exam attempt so that you are able to easily ace the exam. And in the end, we are going to take questions, so live Q&A. So even more nationalities, places across the world are coming up: India, Ireland, Switzerland, Zambia. So welcome to everyone, and I'm very glad to be here today with you. So, this is a little bit about me so that you know me, for those of you who don't know me before. So, I am Alina Kareem. I am an ACCA expert tutor for financial reporting and strategic business reporting exams. I am an FCCA myself, so a fellow member of ACCA, which means that I have been exactly through the journey that you have followed. So, I have attempted these exams. Then I have been teaching these exams for over a decade. I have conducted trainings for the tutors of this paper and the students also across many different countries across the globe, in person and online sessions. Currently, I am teaching in the SCANS e-campus, and I'm also a sustainability reporting specialist, because now our exam is also focusing on it as a new area. So that is something that I also specialize in. So that's my background. And the purpose of this background is just to give you the confidence that you're in right hands. And I will be sharing whatever I have gathered as a student. Some techniques will be what I used to follow and what used to work for me as a student. And then, other than that, we are going to focus on how the marker, understanding how the marker does the marking, how we have understood that over a decade. We have examiner conferences also where we've met the examiner. So all of that learning, I've tried to summarize it and put it in the session today. So that was a little bit of focus. Now, today we are going to focus on the Read the Mind of the Marker. And before that, a couple of things that I would like you to understand and always remember. The most important thing is, first of all, remember, your examiner and your marker wants you to pass. Have this confidence. Okay, this is very important, because if you have developed any kind of negative mindset about whether the examiner is going to make such a difficult question that we won't be able to pass, or someone would come out of exam and say that in a question has been tested which has never been tested in the history of ACCA, something of this sort, that is not true. Your examiner, your syllabus setter, your exam markers, all of them, they are working together. And working together for what? To provide the resources in a way that makes you pass. Okay? So if you talk about the syllabus of the exam, remember, nothing which is not there in the syllabus can come up in your exam. So that's first point. Have that confidence. Know that your exam, when it is made, it's not just one person who's making the exam. It is repeatedly tested, checked, time wise, syllabus wise, everything. So have the confidence that you're not going to struggle in the areas that the examiner has already provided the support in. But what's on you is that you make use of all the support that the examiner has actually provided. So the examiner says nothing which is not there in the syllabus is going to be tested in the exam. Cover the whole syllabus. Definitely, every question that comes in your exam is going to be something that you have covered before. Number two, the examiner has told you the paper pattern in advance. No surprises there. So, whatever is going to be in the exam with respect to the content and with respect to the structure of the exam, there are no surprises there. They have told in advance, you need to prepare accordingly. And then the third and most major part, marking. The examiner has told you in advance how the marking is going to be done. So when you are attempting your question, you should exactly know how many marks I am scoring. So once again, something that the examiner has told in advance. So have the confidence that all the resources are there in advance. There should be no surprises for you in terms of the question style, content of the question, and the marking scheme. And when I say content, I mean how the question is asked. There should be no surprises for you in the exam there. And last thing over here is when you do the practice, you should be familiar with the functionalities and the interface of the exam also. So these four things have been told in advance. Practice them. Now it's on you. You practice them so that these should not be a surprise. Yes, the questions are going to be unseen. They are going to be, you are going to see them for the first time. But if you are properly prepared, there is nothing which can stop you from passing this exam easily. So these things are available. You have the syllabus on ACCA website. That's the ACCA website tab of financial reporting exam. That's your best friend. So you have the syllabus there. You have the paper pattern there. I'll touch upon the paper pattern shortly in the end. Then you have the examiner past exam papers, which showed you the content which has been tested in the past. You have been given the examiner reports, which gives you an insight at the end of every exam what candidates did right and what they did wrong. So, all of that. And lastly, you have the read the mind of the marker. So, today, although we are going to focus a lot on the read the mind of the marker, however, you need to cover the other resources also, and all of these clubbed together make your preparation perfect. So, let's proceed with the read the mind of the marker. And initially, I have a small test for you. So there are two types of questions which have been covered in the latest Read the Mind of the Marker. One is related to consolidated financial statements, and the other one is related to interpretation of financial statements. Now, these two are the questions which are going to be there in your exam for sure, these two areas. Now, your exam is divided into three chunks. Section A covers objective test questions. Section B again has objective test questions which are related to a particular case, but these are all auto marked. So, in these, the marker judgment is not involved. Okay, in the first two parts of your exam, the marking judgment is not involved. The marker will, rather, these are auto marked. There's not even a marker involved. So either your answer is right or it is wrong. So there is no margin of subjectivity. But when you come to the part C of the exam, which is worth 40 marks, very major 40 marks, there the judgment and the subjectivity part comes in. So that is where we are going to focus on today's discussion. And why these two questions have been picked up? Because you see, consolidation as well as interpretation is something which is definitely going to be there in your exam. The ACCA examiner has divided your syllabus into chunks. And they have said that every chunk is going to be tested. They are marked as syllabus areas A, B, C, D. So every chunk is going to be tested for sure. Consolidation and interpretation are two of those chunks. So definitely these two are going to be there in your exams. These can come up in section A or section B or section C of your exam. So which is why we are going to take up these two examples, but it's the today's session, it's going to give you an insight which you can apply on other similar questions also. So it's not just this, it's about understanding the psychology of the marker so that you can replicate this for other questions also. So these two we are going to focus on. But so we'll start off with the first chunk that is related to the consolidated financial statements. Now, the activity that I said I have for you, I am going to give you 30 seconds, and just you have something on your screen. I want you to write down just in front of you with the paper and a pen or on your iPads or your phone, how many marks do you think are available for these parts? I'm going to show you three such slides. We don't have much time, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds. So, initial 30 seconds, I'm going to stop over here, read the lines which are mentioned in front of you in the table, and write down what you think the marker will give to a student, the marks, full marks, if the student has written the answer absolutely correctly. So let me just turn on the timer for myself so that I know I can be time bound. Later on, we will be talking about these. No, I want you to answer the individual points. So, addition of carrying amounts. If you do carry addition of, let's suppose, property, plant, and equipment of parent and subsidiary, how many marks do you get? If you do the fair value adjustment, how many marks do you get? So, individual points, not the full question. Individual points. You have the marks tab in front of you, write down. Okay, now I'm going to move to the next slide. Again, I will clarify not the total marks, individual marks, and just write them in front of you. I will show you what the actual marks are, and then you can compare how what you thought you will get by writing in such an answer and what the examiner actually gives. So the next slide. Starting off with fair. Yes, you can share like Jalissa has did. So she's written that first one. She thinks, I'm sorry if I'm confusing the gender. 0.5, 1, 1, 0.5, 0.5. Tanya, I think the rest of the students can see it. Maybe if you can reconnect to the session, that might help. Okay, so we have overall the fair value adjustment in goodwill 10 marks. Very interesting insights. Oh, I'm loving the answers because in shortly we are going to see what the actual marks are. And there is going, some answers are correct, some are close, some are a little too far from the actual point. Please remember, it is the full question is 20 marks. I'm just showing you a certain part. Okay, your time is up for this one. Next one, last slide. So, how many marks do you think are available for overall consolidated retained earnings? And the breakup of that consolidated retained earnings is broken up into chunks. So, we have 3, we have 5, NCI and SFP, 5 marks. Okay. See, there is a difference of opinion. One person is saying 5 marks, the other is saying 1 to 2 marks. You're both attempting the same exam. So, we'll see who's right. A few seconds left. It cannot be 26. That's not the total marks. Okay, great, done. Thank you so much, guys, for participating. Thank you. So, you see, we have different opinions. And that was precisely my aim for conducting this activity because we had limited time. So, activity was slightly tricky, but that was precisely my aim that you have at least thought about what the marks are. Just one quick question, and then I'll show you the actual marking. How many of you, be very honest, I'm not the marker over here, so I'm not going to evaluate you on anything. No one is going to judge you over here. That's the commitment of our session today. No one is going to judge anyone else. So how many of you have actually thought about this individual marking before while you were solving the questions? How many? A yes, no, considered, but never actually took it very seriously. Any answers? That's okay. Even if you say no, that's perfectly fine. When I was a student, I understood this a little late. So that's okay. Okay, thank you, Danu. I did good. Very good. Okay, mix, never, me, yes, no, no. Okay, so that's good. That's the mix of answers that I was looking for. And once again, I said, thank you. Yes, honestly, never thought about it. That's exactly what I was looking for. That, yes, it's very good that you took it seriously. That ultimately, at times, there is a lot of syllabus of FR. I don't blame anyone. Honestly, as I said, I'm not going to judge anyone because it is a lot of syllabus of FR. And you have a lot to cover over here. So at times we solve the questions, we see the standard solution, we match it, we find out where we went wrong. But taking out the time to mark it and think about, not just marking a solved question, rather, in fact, thinking about before solving the question, what is going to get me a mark, that is something we normally don't do. And that's what we are going to focus on today. So, starting off with strategies for scoring maximum marks. Now, starting off with the consolidation question. Now, let's focus on. I'm sorry, I'm not going to look at the comments for a certain time. Let's just all focus on the screen for the moment because this is the most critical part. So, over here, please see that for the accounting treatment in a consolidation question. So in the consolidation questions, you either get a consolidated statement of financial position or you get a consolidated statement of profit or loss. And the first thing that we as teachers say is that pick up the values of the parent, pick up the values of the subsidiary and do a line by line addition. That's the most common thing that you study everywhere. That you do a line by line addition when you're doing a consolidation question. So remember that for every asset and every liability, I'm saying every because I don't mean the total assets and the total liabilities. No. If I'm talking about assets, that property, plant, and equipment, current assets, if there is a bifurcation of trade receivables, inventory, cash, for every line item, when you add parent company's balance and subsidiary company's balance, you get zero point 0.5 marks for this. We repeatedly in different webinars say focus on easy marks first. What are those easy marks? These are the easy marks. The things in which you just pick up the figures from the question, you just put them in the right place, or you just add them and you get the marks. So you're not thinking about whether the just fair value adjustment is going to be high, low, what percentage of additional depreciation, nothing. You just focus on the figures, you pick up the figures, you add them, and you get the marks. So the first thing is now what should you do? What is the key takeaway from here? That when you are doing a consolidation question, see, you are solving a question in a computer based exam environment. Put the equal to sign, put the sum sign or the equal to sign. The first thing that you should do is do the line by line addition of assets and liabilities. Remember, in consolidation, equity is not added on a line by line basis, only assets and liabilities are added on a line by line basis. So do that so that you are mentally relaxed that if I have added 6 items, 3 marks are already in my pocket. So they are already these are the marks that I have already secured. Then move on and read the adjustments and solve the adjustments. So that's the first point and a very key point for easy marks. Then fair value adjustment in relevant line item. Now, please read this carefully because fair value adjustment, when we do the fair value adjustment, normally in case of consolidation, fair value adjustment is given at the time of acquisition. Now, at the acquisition, there are multiple impacts where fair value adjustment is going to go. So, on one hand, if the examiner says that there is a non current asset, there is a building which has a fair value adjustment of, let's suppose, 100, and then there is an additional depreciation of 10 on it. There are multiple points where the fair value adjustment is going to go. On one hand, the fair value adjustment is going to be added in the property, plant, and equipment. On the other hand, the fair value adjustment is going to go and impact the calculation of goodwill. Thirdly, the fair value adjustment, the additional depreciation related to it, that is going to impact the retained earnings. And then the fair value adjustment related to that building, that is going to affect the value of the building also in statement of financial position. So there are 4 different aspects in which the fair value adjustment is impacting. Each part of that has separate marks. Right now, what you see on the screen is the fair value adjustment in the relevant statement of financial position line item. At times, I've written line item because at times the fair value adjustment is given in non current assets. At times, it is given in current assets. The question that we'll see in that it is given in current assets. At times, there is a deferred tax adjustment. At times, there is a liability adjustment. So, there's a contingent liability which the subsidiary had not recorded, but we need to recognize it. So, there are different kinds of items that come up. So when you adjust that item in assets or liabilities part, that has a separate one mark. So if you are missing out on adjustment, the question says fair value adjustment, and you are not adjusting it in the on the format of statement of financial position, you're going to lose out on this mark. So be very careful about this. Then our favorite, unrealized profit. I think 95% of the consolidation questions, if not more, have a treatment of intra group sales in it. We've seen that. No surprises there. Once again, there are no surprises. The examiner has provided us past exam papers. You can access the other exam questions, past exam questions in the study hub also. There also you can see almost in every question of consolidation, there is an intra-group unrealized profit. So in case of intra-group unrealized profit, when you make the adjustment in the financial statements and in the relevant, we'll see it in the retained earnings also, but mainly when you adjust it in the financial statements, which is in the inventory part, that is going to get you one mark. So separate one mark for this. If you're missing out on this, why is there one mark for it? Why not lesser, not 0.5? Because the the calculation of intra-group unrealized profit is tricky. You first have to identify the intra-group sale, then you have to identify what was the unrealized profit on it by doing the adjustment of the markup or margin. So this one mark is further broken down into two parts. 0.5 marks are available for the calculation of unrealized profit, and 0.5 marks are available for its adjustment in the inventories. Okay, so once again, very easy marks. You know what the unrealized profit adjustment is. Inventories are always, it's always going to be subtracted from inventory, so they are free marks. Just do the calculation correct. Focus on whether the examiner has given you profit margin or markup, whether the question is giving you cost or sales price. Do the calculation accordingly. Find the unrealized profit. So a company sold 1,000 worth of goods, only 30% are available in the inventory. So unrealized profit is always calculated on the inventory, which remains unsold sold at the year end. So bifurcation, remember this: 0.5 marks for the calculation and 0.5 marks for correctly showing where this is going to be adjusted in the inventories. Then, oh, this part I absolutely love. These are like free marks available. Now, parent companies share capital in consolidated statement of financial position. Such easy marks, and I'm sure all of you know this. But what happens in exams, at times there are certain errors that you make not because you don't know the concept, because you have a lot of time pressure. And I think this is the most common mistake which is made under time pressure, that you pick up by mistake. You may pick up subsidiary companies share capital, or apply the percentage to of holding to the subsidiary company share capital. No, whatever complication in the consolidated statements is, whether one company has one subsidiary or 500 subsidiaries or associates, you are going to get a maximum of one or two subsidiaries in your question. That's a given by the examiner, not more than that. So, but ultimately, in the share capital, always the figure that is going to be shown is going to be the parent company's share capital. Only if you identify this and put it in the right place, you get 0.5 marks for this. Okay, now one quick question: can anybody tell me there is only and only one possible adjustment that can come up in the parent company's share capital? What is that? Possibly just one adjustment. What is that? Anyone? Once again, there are no wrong answers. So just make a guess. even if you're not sure. Absolutely right, Azhar. Thank you so much. Share for share exchange. At times, the examiner gives you the scenario that while they went and purchased the subsidiary company's shares, they made a share for share exchange. What does a share for share exchange mean? That they purchase. Okay, now we have had the answers. Now I will once again bring you back to the screen. Listen to me carefully because there are some right answers and some are not, they're close but not the exact ones. So the only possible adjustment that can come up in this figure is that the company says that there is, the question says that there was a share for share exchange. The parent company issued its own shares to acquire the shares of the subsidiary company. However, the question also clearly says that this share issuance has not been included in the parent company's share capital above. So if this line is written, if there is a share for share exchange and this line is written, only then you will need to make an adjustment over here. Otherwise, you simply pick up the figure from the question, put it in the answer, your answer space, and boom, you get 0.5 marks for that. Okay. So once again, easy marks. Please get these marks in the very beginning so that you're not confused about it later. Okay, then the next one is value of deferred consideration or contingent consideration in statement of financial position. Now, once again, in the statement of financial position, when there is a contingent consideration or a deferred consideration, in that case, normally there are two adjustments. One adjustment goes to the goodwill side, and the other one is then a liability, and that is shown in the statement of financial position. Just showing that part in the statement of financial position, that is going to get you 1 mark. Okay. And calculating the correct figure for it is going to get you the other mark. I've written 1 plus 1 because I wanted to clarify this, that 1 mark is for calculation. Why 1 mark for calculation? Because in case of deferred consideration, you need to know the value, you need to identify the correct discount factor, you need to multiply this and calculate the present value. And then if it has been like 1 year or 2 years from acquisition, then you have to do the unwinding also. So there is 1 mark for calculation. If it's complicated, maximum 1.5 marks, and then 0.5 marks for showing the correct value in the statement of financial position. So overall, this working is for 2 marks. So once again, keep these in mind. You're going to get, you have access to these slides. You can access the recording again also. So please keep this in mind as you solve the question so that you know that if I'm missing out on any part, I'm going to lose out marks on it. Then the next one. So next one is the fair value adjustment in goodwill. This is what I was telling you, that fair value adjustment does not just touch one part. It is shown in the statement of financial position, and then it is shown in the calculation of goodwill at the time of acquisition also. So when you put in the correct value of fair value adjustment in the goodwill, for that also you get 1 mark. Now, once again, by now, your mind should start working in the way that this 1 mark is further broken down into two parts. 0.5 marks for correctly identifying the fair value, right? And second mark, 0.5 marks for putting it correctly in the goodwill calculation. If there is a fair value increase, you have to add it in equity. If there is a fair value decrease, you have to subtract it from the equity. So 0.5 marks for the correct calculation and 0.5 marks for the correct valuation. The overall goodwill calculation, I know we saw a lot of interesting comments. Someone said 2 marks, someone said 6 marks, 3 marks, all of that. So 4 to 5 marks are generally the goodwill allocated to the goodwill calculation as per the past exam papers and as per the read the mind of the marker. And that is broken down into the chunks that I have mentioned, because 4 to 5 marks basically cover your share capital of the subsidiary company, share premium, which is the net assets, any fair value adjustment, any pre-acquisition retained earnings, 0.5 marks separate for it. So all of these things, these are when these are broken up. So I'm revising this. For goodwill calculation, total 4 to 5 marks are further broken down into what? Value of consideration, 1 mark. Okay. Fair value of NCI, normally the second mark. Net fair value of net assets of subsidiary, the third mark. Any adjustment to the pre-acquisition retained earnings in terms of fair value adjustment, etc., 4 marks. And if there is more than one fair value adjustment, then you may have up to 5 marks. So for everything, the value and how when you place it correctly in the format, there are zero point 0.5 marks for it. So what I do, or what I normally recommend students in my teaching also, is remember the format of goodwill. So write down that format immediately as you open the question, so that there is no error in the placement part. Rest is calculation part. Pick that up from the question and then put it in the correct point. Then valuation of consideration in goodwill calculation, 1 mark separately. So again, keep this in mind that whether you have deferred consideration or you have share for share exchange, there is a separate mark available for the working. Then revaluation reserve, consolidated revaluation reserve. So when you talk about the statement of financial position, consolidated statement of financial position, the opening part and the share of the group both need to be written. So interesting. And you will see that it's a very common feedback by the examiner that a lot of students lose marks on this. Why? I don't know. It's so easy. So when you have to write the consolidated revaluation reserve, you need to take the parent company's shares, or you have to add to it the share of group from the revaluation reserve of the subsidiary company. You do these two simple steps and you get 2 marks for it. Okay. Then non-controlling interest in statement of financial position. So non-controlling interest, the overall figure at the calculation part, that also has 1 separate mark available for it. Then the last part for consolidation, as I asked you, what is the breakup for the overall consolidation retained earnings? Again, the overall consolidated retained earnings, there are 4 to 5 marks. And what is the breakup of for it? Again, parent company's retained earnings, you just have to pick them up from the question and write them in the format, and you get 0 0.5 marks for it. Okay, very important and easy marks. Once again, there is no complication in this, because for parent company's earnings, you don't even need to calculate the pre and post acquisition retained earnings. That's for subsidiary company. So just simply pick up the figure of the parent company's retained earnings, write them, you get 0 0.5 marks for it. You have unrealized profit, 0 0.5 marks. As I told you, there are separate marks for the adjustment of unrealized profit in the as a line item in inventories. Over here, there is separate adjustment. Okay. Okay. And then we have the consideration, which is related to consideration related adjustment. If there is a deferred consideration, you have to do its unwinding post acquisition. If you have a contingent consideration, there may be a change in its fair value. So that adjustment, that has a separate 1 mark for it. So you see, it is so important to have a complete grip on what the considerations are and how they are adjusted. Then NCI share of movement in retained earnings, definitely 1 mark. You do the NCI calculation and you give the share over here. Once again, you see NCI calculation, it has separate marks for placement in statement of financial position, and you have separate marks for placing them in the consolidated retained earnings. Then fair value adjustment with relevant changes, 1.5. So as you know, as I mentioned, if there is a fair value adjustment in non-current assets, then any additional depreciation on it might be there. That is going to be 1.5 marks. So all of that, identifying the value and placing it correctly in the financial statements, you're going to get 1.5 marks for it. Okay. So this is all for the consolidation question, primarily focused on the consolidated statement of financial position. So once you have seen these, I would request you to revisit these, take a screenshot, whatever way you feel comfortable, keep it in front of you the next time you're doing your consolidation questions, so that you know when you're solving the question, what are the easy marks, how can I grab them, and what is the way to maximize my marks. And also, I should not miss out on any point in the exam. Okay? So this is all with consolidation. I will quickly move on to the interpretation question also, and we'll keep the questions for the end. Okay? Okay. Now, okay, sorry, some few points about consolidation which were there. I think they may answer some of the questions also that you've asked in the chat. Uh, One very major thing at which the students lose marks, because I told the things that gain you marks. So I wanted to include some observations where the candidates struggle also. So the first part is that a lot of students at times forget that when the parent company acquires the subsidiary company, the investment that they make, that is netted off through goodwill calculation. If you show any remaining part of parent company into subsidiary company, that is like a major error. Okay, so although there is no negative marking in ECC exam, but still it is called a fundamental error. Okay, please don't make that. Uh, the examiner repeatedly says this. Please make use of the sum feature, because a lot of students, when they do the calculation of goodwill, or they do the calculation of current assets or non-current assets or equity, the final figure is not right because they're doing it on calculator. Why waste time when you have the sum feature, and that is foolproof way of calculation also. So apply the formula correctly and use the sum feature. It will save you time. Time is, as we say, time is money, time is marks in exam. Okay, so save your time, use the feature to get maximum time available and foolproof working in calculation. And once again, the examiner highly recommends that for subsidiary companies' net assets, make a separate table or a working in which you show the pre acquisition earnings, post acquisition earnings, adjustments, all of that, so that you are able to go through these and ultimately you are able to identify the correct figures which need to be placed elsewhere. And then, point already given, this is a phenomena which is used by the markers, and that is that please remember, showing one calculation again and again in different ways, that's not going to get you any additional marks. So if you have done a calculation once and a mark has been given to you, the next time you do it, the marker simply marks TAG. So the point has already been given, no additional marks for it. So don't waste any time over here. Why? Because time is marks in your exam. Okay. Now, coming to the interpretation of financial statements, which is the next very important area. And I know a lot of students, they struggle with this area. Normally, whenever I have taken feedback from the general audience like you, it's like they struggle with the interpretation part and the theory part of interpretation a lot. So we are going to talk about once again what gets you maximum marks in an interpretation question. So over here, please see that we are talking about the when you get a question on interpretation. A, that question is definitely going to be there in your exam. Okay, but once again, two interpretation questions cannot come up. If someone is saying that, that person is making it up. So over here, please see very carefully what are the things that can get you marks in a ratio analysis question, or what we call an interpretation question. So over here, when you calculate a ratio, you get 0.5 marks for it. Okay. So if you are calculating ratios for 2 years, so for example, the question said that you have to calculate the operating profit margin for 20x7 and 20x8. So for 20x7, if you do the calculation correctly and you show the working of it also, why do we emphasize on working? Because even if one part of working is incorrect, at least that will give the examiner an idea about where you went wrong. So if you've calculated 20x7 correctly, you'll get 0.5 marks for it. 20x8 correctly, 0.5 marks for it. So, in case of interpretation, we are always doing a comparison. We are either doing a comparison with past year, or we are doing a comparison with a competitor or industry average, any such thing. So, in comparison, every ratio calculation is going to get you zero point 0.5 marks. So, that's the first part. And then, very easily, in terms of interpretation, we say that every valid, well developed argument gets 1 mark. Okay? Now, that's easier said than done. I've included a few points over here as to what actually means by valid, well developed point. Now, the first thing is the examiner repeatedly says, please just don't write the increase or decrease in their ratio, because increase or decrease in the ratio, that is not something which is going to get you any marks. Once again, you're wasting time just by writing the GP has increased by 20% and the operating profit has increased by, let's suppose, 5%. No, that's not going to get you any marks. So everything has to come with the logic. See, now you are at the skills level. So at this level, it is expected from you to behave in a certain way, in a certain position in an organization. So if you go to an organization, you cannot just say, oh, your gross profit has increased from last year. The thing is, what is the logic behind it? What is the reason behind it? And that's what you're supposed to give over here. So over here, it says that what are the things that get you that 1 mark? Number one, you have to give the plausible reason for the increase or decrease in ratio. Now, please remember that your best friend in an interpretation question is actually the text of the question. When you are given the financial statements, you are given some additional points also. So, in those additional points, always lies the logic for the increase or decrease in ratio. If you use that, trust me, if you use the scenario to write the answer, that is something which is easily going to solve the problem, and that is going to get you the that additional mark also. So write the plausible reason. At times, see, the examiner has to give you a short question, so it cannot give, he or she cannot give you the overall answer as to what are the possible reasons. So at times you have to say that this increase may be due to this change. This may be due to the increased marketing that has been done. This may be due to the additional location that has been acquired. So the plausible reasons have to be mentioned. Then, relating the impact of change in one ratio on another ratio. Oh, your examiner loves this. So your paper marker also loves this. So creating a link that, let's suppose, the easiest example would be that gross profit ratio has changed by 10%, but the operating profit ratio has changed only by 8%. So you identify that the change in gross profit ratio, after that, what were the additional expenses that have happened which have resulted in the increase in operating ratio to be of 8%. So your examiner or your paper marker loves an interconnected portion where you identify each part and you link the ratios to each other. As you know, return on capital employed can be linked to other ratios. So create a linkage of those ratios. Then restatement of a ratio with valid discussion. So at times there is a change. So there was an operation which was sold during the current year. That operation was there in the last year, or a subsidiary was acquired in the current year that was not there in the previous year. So if such a major change is happening in your question, you take out, we call them one-off items. So the markers call them one-off items. Those one-off items, you take them out of the scenario and you say, okay, if this had not taken place, this restructuring had not taken place, then the expenses would have been this. I calculate the ratio and I compare it, and it's not a drastic change from the previous year. So your marker loves it that you identify the one-off, the critical items that have taken place in the year. You remove their effect and you say that with that removal, this is the adjustment. We've seen such questions in the past exam papers there was a disposal of land, there was a disposal of subsidiary, and the parent was renting the premises by subsidiary, all of that. So you adjust that, and that gives you a very good argument. And once again, another thing that the market loves is identify an issue for the future. So, where you suggest that this particular change which has taken in the company in the year, it has not affected the interpretation or the ratios in the current year, but it may have an effect in the future. If you identify that, the examiner likes it and you may get additional marks for it. Then, certain key observations. This was the marking scheme, but certain key observations with respect to interpretation. Number one, please make clear presentation of ratios. Make a chart. If a pre-available format is not there, then please make a proper chart, write the formula, write the ratio, and then solve it. So that's very important. Put in a proper formula. Don't just calculate it on the calculator and put the answer. Then read the requirement very carefully. Please see what the examiner is asking. If the examiner is asking you for analysis of performance of the company, please focus on that. If the examiner is asking you to focus on the position of the company, please focus on that. If the examiner is saying liquidity ratios, what is the impact of it? What is the impact of this particular subsidiary acquisition? There was a question in which they said that there have been some one-off items during the year, and the CEO has given these observations. Comment on these observations. Then the examiner is not asking you for a generic comparison. The examiner is asking you to comment on the feedback of that particular CEO. Okay, so read the requirement very carefully and give a relevant answer. That's going to get you marks. Read the data in the question carefully, what is to be included in the calculation of the ratio. So pick that up very carefully. This was particularly in the context of a point where in one of the exams, it was here in this particular sample also, that the examiner had particularly said that I want to include the short term part of the loan also in the debt ratios. Now the examiner has clearly said it, and the examiner is right. So what the students did was they eliminated that from the working. Now, if the examiner is particularly saying that this is a company policy, then you have to follow it and you have to write the answer accordingly. So please identify that. Use clear and concise points of discussion. Don't ramble. Don't repeat the points once again. If you've written a point once, you write it again. You write it 5 times. You're not going to get additional marks for it. And then no marks for merely stating the difference in the ratios, and state the multiple factors impacting the ratio. So once again, the marker loves this point, that don't just say, oh, this is because of this. So identify multiple reasons. If the receivables are they increasing in proportion to the sales? Is this a marketing tact? Is this poor administration control? There are multiple reasons for it, so identify, but please make them relevant to the scenario. And remember, one last point, very important, listen to this one carefully, that in your exam question, each and every point, each and every, rather, I would say, word that is written in your scenario, in your interpretation question, is going to be linked to your answer in one way or the other. So if you are feeling that, okay, they got a grant during the current year, but I can't link it to any ratio, it means you're missing out something. So always look for the factors, use each and every point, and solve the question accordingly. Then, no marks for duplication of figures or points. Clear logical structure of the answer. Show the calculations first. Write down position, performance. Write the analysis one by one. There are no marks for copying text from the question. Some students, I don't know why, do that. Give a conclusion or a recommendation. And that conclusion or recommendation has one separate mark for it. So remember, you lose out on 1 mark if you don't give a conclusion or a recommendation. And very importantly, as I've mentioned in red, identify how the information in the scenario affects the ratios. That's the most important thing and the most important key takeaway. Okay, so this is all with the interpretation part. Now I want to show you, quickly go through the Read the Mind of the Marker. They are available for you on the ACCA platform. But I wanted to go through these with you so that later on, once you're done with the session, you can go and visit them and see how the learnings that I've shared are implemented over here. So this is the Read the Mind of the Marker. You have two questions available, Paladon and Mobile. Then for each question, the question has been given, the requirements have been given, and then there are observations also. And there are two candidate answers which have been provided. You see, this is a summary. Candidate 1 got 13.5 marks out of 20, the other one got 9.5 marks. You can click these and here, very well done. So, what has the candidate written and what are the marks awarded for? So, half mark available for simply adding the figures. Then, as you go, this is note number 1. You can see. Then you have the note number 2, 2.5 marks were available. Line by line addition, inventory adjustment, unrealized profit adjustment, that is how it is done. So you have the question available, you have the question answer available, you have the two possible attempts available, and you can go through them and see how for each figure the answers have been provided. So half mark included for what? These are all as per the workings that I've shared. So you see over here, half mark has been included for only showing the parent company's share capital. That is what I also just shared with you. So retained earnings, for the retained earnings, they have the workings available. So what was the 1 mark available for? You can see this was very important. I wanted to show you this, that unwinding of discount, correct percentage had to be used in one of these answers, wrong percentage was used for calculation, and then the unwinding. So there was no mark for including deferred consideration at the amount to be paid, but the candidate correctly unwound the discount. So multiple factors are there. Then similarly, in the second question, this is an in which the data of 2 years is available. Then further information is available over here. And in these, the ratios are there. And then they show you how the tools have answered this question. So once again, as I said, I want you to first attempt these questions and then go through these answers. So you see this one has properly the working of they've shown the formula, they've shown the working and the answer later on. And then when you move forward in it, you see that there is an explanation also. So in terms of explanation also, performance, position, 1 mark for a plausible reason where revenue may have fallen. So each and everything, this was the plausible reason. So given the overall number of flights and destination remain the same in both years, decrease of revenue might be due to excessive proportion of discounts being given. So you see a plausible option has been picked up and the candidate scored 1 mark just for writing this line. So there is no issue with respect to the time. You have to manage the time well, and that is how you need to write to the point. Okay, so these are the points. Since we have limited time over here, so I will this sort of like my homework request for you. This is not something that I'm giving you, but this is a very high request for you, that especially after you've done my session today, please immediately go through these questions, because you've very recently, right now, you've just gone through the marking scheme. So when you see its application in the questions, that's going to help you even more. Then some of the points over here, that in the consolidated statements and the interpretation, there are separate marks available for the calculations, the explanations, and therefore the marking is done. So focus on all of these parts. Now, a few items of practical advice for your upcoming exam attempt. As I said in the beginning, have the confidence that everything that is relevant for your exam has been told in advance. So, over here also, please see the exam structure is very clear. Section A and B are OTs and OT cases, they are auto marked, 2 marks each, no partial marking available. Multiple response questions are there. In multiple response questions, if the examiner is asking for two answers, give two answers. Giving one will not get marks. So please practice the questions accordingly. Then there are fill in the blanks in which you're not supposed to write any text. Remember, this part of the exam has no subjectivity involved. Either the answer is right or unfortunately it is wrong. Understanding of the structure, in the section C, you will get final accounts question, interpretation question, or a consolidation question. And in the final accounts, because we have discussed consolidation and interpretation in great detail, so I covered the final accounts portion over here as to what are the possible items that can be tested in a final accounts question. So statement of profit or loss can come up with other comprehensive income, adjusted profit, statement of financial position, changes in equity, or statement of cash flows. So in case of final accounts, once again, sorry, focus on the easy marks first. As we have discussed, make the format of financial statements, pick up the figures from the questions, do all the adjustments that are written in the exam, and you will be able to easily manage things. Always prepare and plan the answer beforehand. Show all your workings, and I want you to follow these steps while you're doing the question at home also. Create a linkage to your workings, put a number, or better yet, link it in your Excel format, the workspace that you have. And remember, there is an own figure rule. Even if you don't know an accounting treatment, you'll be penalized only once for a mistake, and going forward, the examiner is going to consider that the answer. Consider time apportionment where relevant, especially in terms of consolidation. And very importantly, manage your time well. You have 1.8 minutes per mark. When they're over, move to the next question. Remember, by starting a new question, you get more marks as compared to spending extra time on the older question. And lastly, some of the practical advice. I know we are almost running out of time, just 2 to 3 minutes more, please. So, for the practical advice, I would say that over here, use the practice platform by ACCA. Again, use the study hub and the topic explainer videos that are already available there. There is a lot of practice material, there is text stuff available. Read the examiner articles that are there. Your topic explainer videos are, the link is available in study hub also. They are also on the ACCA website. At, Attempt the mock exams, that's very important. Attempt the whole exam, all parts of the exams, and know the functionalities beforehand. The exam functionality should not be a surprise for you in the exam. And while you are doing the questions and the practice, especially interpretation, focus on both the financial and the non-financial part, especially the sustainability that has recently come up. So this is all. We have covered all of these things. And so just very quickly, I'll move on to and hand over my last just bit is practice, 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 because everything that we've discussed today, it all comes down to that. So thank you very much. And now I hand it over back to Martin. Thank you so much, Martin, for bearing with me. And thank you to all the students also, especially in the extra time.
Thank you so much, Alina. Lots to unpack there, and fantastic job that you have done to unpack that information for the students. I hope that they did find it useful. So that's all the time that we had for the session today. I had mentioned that we'll have a session for questions, but unfortunately, we have run out of time, but we have tried to respond to as many questions as we possibly could in the chat while you were speaking. So I believe we have covered as many questions as we could. Just a quick reminder to the attendees that this session was being recorded and you'll be able to access it. You'll receive an email tomorrow with a link to access the recording, and you can still access it on the same link that you used to join. Alina, you've mentioned about the mocks. Very quickly, just to emphasize that the mocks are now live on the practice platform, so students can begin accessing them. as always, we encourage that you engage with those mocks as early as you possibly can, so that you have time to review them and take whatever actions that need to be taken between now and the exam date. But for the rest, from the rest of us at SCCA, just to wish you all the best in your preparations, and certainly all the best in your FR exams. Thank you so much, and goodbye for now.
Thank you so much. Take care. Best of luck for the exam. Thank you.